In the early 20th century, Europe was a continent on edge. Rivalries among great powers fueled an arms race, while tangled alliances meant that any small conflict could spiral out of control. Imperial ambitions and fierce nationalism stoked resentment and unrest, especially in the Balkans. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914 lit the fuse, plunging Europe into a devastating war. What followed would forever alter nations, societies, and the course of history itself. In the early 20th century, Europe was a continent simmering with tension. An intricate web of alliances, imperial ambitions, and rising nationalism made war all but inevitable. The major powers, Britain, France, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Russia, and the Ottoman Empire, had built towering militaries and colonial empires that stretched across the globe. Militarism. The arms race had intensified throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Nations poured resources into building massive armies and navies. Germany, aiming to rival Britain's Royal Navy, launched a rapid naval expansion. France and Germany maintained large standing armies with mandatory conscription policies. This buildup created an atmosphere where military solutions seemed not just viable, but inevitable. Alliances. Europe was divided into two major alliance systems: the Triple Entente, France, Russia, and Britain, and the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Although intended as deterrents, these alliances meant that any localized conflict had the potential to trigger a continent-wide war. Imperialism. The competition for colonies had bred resentment among European powers. Germany, a latecomer to imperialism, sought a place in the sun, challenging British and French dominance. Rivalries over African and Asian territories fueled distrust. Nationalism. In the Balkans, nationalism was a volatile force. Slavic groups under Austro-Hungarian rule sought independence, supported by Serbia and Russia. Meanwhile, German and French nationalists remained bitter over the loss of Alsace-Lorraine after the Franco-Prussian War. The spark. Assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated in Sarajevo by Gavrilo Princip, a Bosnian Serb nationalist. Austria-Hungary, with Germany's backing, issued a harsh ultimatum to Serbia. When Serbia's response failed to fully satisfy Austria-Hungary, war was declared on July 28. The dominoes fell swiftly. Russia mobilized to protect Serbia. Germany declared war on Russia and France. Germany invaded Belgium. And Britain, honoring its guarantee of Belgian neutrality, declared war on Germany. Europe, sleepwalking into catastrophe, plunged into war. Section 2. The war breaks out. 1914 to 1915, Germany's Schlieffen Plan. Germany's initial strategy was to avoid a two-front war by quickly defeating France through Belgium and then turning east against Russia. The plan required rapid movement, but underestimated Belgium's resistance and Britain's swift intervention. Battle of the Frontiers. In August 1914, battles raged across the French borders. Although German forces won early victories, they overextended themselves. The French Plan Sévigné, a bold offensive into Alsace-Lorraine, failed disastrously. The miracle of the Marne. The First Battle of the Marne, September 1914, saw French and British forces halt the German advance near Paris. Using taxis to transport troops, the French counterattacked along the Marne River. Germany retreated, leading to the race to the sea and the establishment of entrenched positions. Eastern Front and Tannenberg. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, Russia launched early offensives into East Prussia. At the Battle of Tannenberg, August 1914, German generals Hindenburg and Ludendorff encircled and destroyed a Russian army, capturing 92,000 prisoners. It was a significant German victory, though the Eastern Front remained a massive drain on resources. War beyond Europe. Japan, honoring its alliance with Britain, seized German holdings in China and the Pacific. British and French colonial troops fought in Africa and naval battles extended to the South Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. 1915. Stalemate and new fronts. Despite repeated offensives, neither side could achieve a decisive breakthrough. Italy, initially neutral, joined the Allies in 1915, opening a new front against Austria-Hungary. The Gallipoli campaign saw Allied forces, including Australian and New Zealand troops, attempt and fail to knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war. Optimism gave way to grim realization. This war would not be short. Section 3. The Era of Trenches and Stalemate. Trench warfare defined World War I on the Western Front. Soldiers dug elaborate networks of trenches, often separated by no man's land, a barren, shell-cratered expanse filled with barbed wire and death. Life in the trenches. Conditions were appalling. Mud, rats, lice, and disease were constant companions. Soldiers endured trench foot, dysentery, and psychological trauma known as shell shock. Letters home spoke of terror, camaraderie, and longing. Food was monotonous: stale bread, bully beef, and hard biscuits. Sleep was elusive, with artillery bombardments and night raids keeping men constantly on edge. Daily routine. A typical day involved stand-to at dawn, maintenance of trenches, patrols, and preparations for attacks. Boredom alternated with moments of sheer terror. Medical realities. Medical care struggled to keep up. Advances in wound treatment and triage saved lives, but infections like gangrene were rampant. Field hospitals often worked under nightmarish conditions. Stalemate massive offensives, like the battles of Verdun and the Somme, produced horrific casualties for minimal territorial gains. New tactics, such as creeping barrages and coordinated infantry assaults, were developed but often failed against well-defended positions. Trench warfare became a metaphor for the war itself: stagnant, brutal, and seemingly endless. Section 4. Key battles that shaped the war. 1. Battle of the Marne, 1914. The German advance through Belgium and northern France appeared unstoppable. However, in September 1914, French and British forces mounted a desperate counterattack along the Marne River. Utilizing hastily mobilized troops, famously transported by Parisian taxis, the Allies forced a German retreat. The battle ended Germany's hopes for a swift victory in the West. 2. Battle of Tannenberg, 1914. Germany faced two Russian armies invading East Prussia. Utilizing superior rail networks and intercepted communications, German commanders Hindenburg and Ludendorff encircled and annihilated one Russian army at Tannenberg. It was a stunning victory that bolstered German morale, but could not prevent a prolonged two-front war. 3. Gallipoli Campaign, 1915. Seeking to knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war and open a supply route to Russia, Allied forces landed on the Gallipoli Peninsula. Poor planning, fierce Ottoman resistance, and rugged terrain doomed the campaign. After months of bloody stalemate, the Allies evacuated. The campaign profoundly shaped national identities in Australia and New Zealand. 4. Second Battle of Ypres, 1915. In April 1915, German forces unleashed chlorine gas against Allied trenches, marking the first large-scale use of chemical weapons. Despite heavy casualties, Canadian forces notably held their positions. The battle highlighted the escalating horrors of modern warfare. Battle of Verdun, 1916. Germany aimed to bleed France white by attacking Verdun, a symbolically important fortress. The French, under General Pétain, mounted a dogged defense. "They shall not pass!" became a rallying cry. After 10 months of brutal fighting, with over 700,000 casualties, Verdun remained in French hands. 6. Battle of the Somme, 1916. Launched to relieve pressure on Verdun, the Somme offensive became synonymous with slaughter. On the first day alone, British forces suffered nearly 60,000 casualties. Despite the introduction of tanks, gains were minimal. By November, over 1 million men had fallen for a few miles of ground. 7. Battle of Passchendaele, 1917, also known as the Third Battle of Ypres, Passchendaele epitomized the futility of trench warfare. Torrential rain turned the battlefield into a quagmire. Men and horses drowned in mud. Casualties approached 500,000, and strategic gains were negligible. 8. Battle of Amiens, 1918. Amiens marked a turning point. Using coordinated attacks with tanks, infantry, artillery, and air support, Allied forces broke through German lines. German morale collapsed. Ludendorff called it the Black Day of the German Army, signaling the beginning of the end. Section 6. The end of the war and its aftermath. By 1918, the Central Powers were crumbling. Spring Offensive Germany launched a massive spring offensive in March 1918, exploiting temporary superiority before American forces arrived in strength. Initial successes alarmed the Allies, but exhausted German reserves. 100 Days Offensive. Beginning with the Battle of Amiens, Allied forces, bolstered by fresh American troops, launched relentless attacks. German defenses cracked and morale collapsed. Collapse of Central Powers Bulgaria surrendered in September. The Ottoman Section 5. New weapons and tactics. World War I revolutionized warfare, introducing new weapons and doctrines that would shape conflicts for the rest of the century.